Will TrumpPutin Alaska talks pave path to Ukraine peace on historic August 15? Few dates in the modern calendar carry as much historical resource as August 15. Across continents and decades, it has been a day when political maps were redrawn, wars ended, nations were born, and cultural moments left an enduring mark. From India's independence in 1947 to the Taliban's capture of Kabul in 2021, the date is studded with episodes that changed the course of nations of this year. It may witness another chapter, a high-stakes summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. The question is whether this meeting will join the list of August 15 milestones or fade into the annals of missed opportunities. On August 15, 2021, the Taliban entered Kabul, completing their lightning takeover of Afghanistan just weeks after the United States began its final troop withdrawal. The collapse of the Western-backed Afghan government happened far more quickly than most intelligence estimates had predicted. With provincial capitals falling in rapid succession, the day became the symbolic end of a 20-year hustled intervention that began after the September 11, 2001, attacks. As Taliban fighters entered the presidential palace, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani fled the country, and chaotic scenes unfolded at Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport. Thousands of Afghans desperate to escape swarmed the tarmac, leading to tragic images of people clinging to departing U.S. military planes. For Washington and its allies, the fall of Kabul was a moment of geopolitical reckoning. It raised questions about the efficacy of nation-building, the reliability of U.S. security commitments, and the future of Afghanistan under Taliban rule. For Afghans, it marked the return of an Islamist regime that had been ousted 2 decades earlier. India's independence from British colonial rule was one of the most transformative moments of the 20th century, not just for South Asia but for the global wave of decolonization that followed. After nearly 200 years under British control, first through the East India Company and later the British Crown, the country emerged as a sovereign, democratic republic. The moment came after decades of sustained nationalist struggle, marked by movements such as the Non-Cooperation Movement, the Civil Disobedience Movement, and the Quit India Movement, led by figures like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Subhash Chandra Bose, and countless unsung freedom fighters. Alongside independence came the partition, which carved the subcontinent into India and Pakistan based on religious demography. This partition unleashed one of the largest migrations in human history, with an estimated 1,015 million people uprooted and crossing borders in both directions, and violence claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. The political and administrative transfer of power was symbolized by Nehru's midnight speech, Tryst with Destiny, delivered to the Constituent Assembly as the clock struck midnight on 15 August this year. India marks its 79th Independence Day, celebrating nearly 8 decades of nationhood, a period that has seen it evolve from a newly freed colony to the world's most populous democracy and one of its fastest-growing major economies. On this day, Emperor Hirohito addressed the Japanese nation via radio, announcing Japan's unconditional surrender. The statement effectively ended World War II in Asia, coming days after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For much of the world, it was VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day, signaling not just the cessation of global conflict but also the dawn of a hustled post-war order. Yet, it also marked the start of Japan's occupation and reconstruction under American guidance, reshaping the country into a pacifist democracy. The same day Japan announced its surrender in World War II, the Korean Peninsula emerged from 35 years of Japanese colonial domination, a period marked by cultural suppression, forced labor, and military conscription. The liberation is celebrated annually as Gwangbokjeol, Restoration of Light in South Korea, and Liberation Day in North Korea, symbolizing the regaining of national sovereignty after decades of foreign rule. But the joy was short-lived. The peninsula, liberated from Japan but not yet unified under a native government, was hastily divided along the 38th parallel into Soviet-occupied territory in the north and US-occupied territory in the south. What was initially intended as a temporary administrative arrangement soon hardened into a geopolitical fault line as Cold War tensions escalated. This division set the stage for the Korean War 1950–1953, which ended not with a peace treaty but with an armistice, leaving the two Koreas technically still at war. The inauguration of the Panama Canal was more than just the completion of an engineering marvel. It was a defining moment in the history of global trade and geopolitics. Spanning 82 kilometers through the Isthmus of Panama, the canal connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, eliminating the need for ships to navigate the long and hazardous route around Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America. Its successful completion on August 15, 1914, just weeks after the outbreak of World War I, transformed maritime commerce by dramatically shortening shipping times and costs. Strategically, the canal cemented the United States' role as a dominant power in the Western Hemisphere. It gave Washington enormous leverage over international shipping and became a key asset in both world wars, allowing the U.S. Navy to redeploy rapidly between oceans. Yet, it also became a flashpoint in U.S.-Latin American relations, with Panamanians long demanding sovereignty over the canal zone. This demand was finally met when control was handed over to Panama on December 31, 1999, under the terms of the 1977 Torrijos-Carter Treaties. The end of French colonial rule in what is today the Republic of Congo, also known as Congo-Brazzaville, was part of a wider wave of African independence in 1960, often called the Year of Africa. While independence was cause for celebration, the years that followed were marked by political instability, coups, and Cold War-era power struggles, illustrating the challenges many post-colonial states faced. On this date, Bahrain ended its status as a British protectorate, becoming a fully sovereign state. Its independence came during a period of British withdrawal from the Gulf and amid the reordering of power in the region following the discovery of oil. Today, Bahrain's strategic location in the Gulf and its close ties with Western powers make its independence anniversary both a national celebration and a reminder of the shifting balance in Middle Eastern geopolitics. When the Woodstock Music Art Fair opened on a dairy farm in Bethel, New York, on August 15, 1969, organizers expected around 50,000 attendees. Instead, more than 400,000 people descended on the site for 3 days of music, peace, and protest, creating one of the largest gatherings in American history at the time, featuring an iconic lineup including Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Who, Santana, and Crosby, Stills, Nash Young. Woodstock became the cultural climax of the 1960s counterculture movement. It embodied an anti-establishment ethos, opposition to the Vietnam War, rejection of materialism, and a belief in collective peace and love, while also revealing the power of music festivals as political and social spaces. Against this historic backdrop, August 15, 2025 will see an extraordinary diplomatic encounter. U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are set to meet in Alaska to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. The war, now well into its third year, has caused widespread devastation and reshaped global security dynamics. Trump had repeatedly claimed, both during his presidential campaign and after taking office in January 2025, that he would end the conflict within 24 hours. Yet, more than half a year into his term, the war grinds on. After setting an August 8 deadline for Russia to agree to a ceasefire or face tougher U.S. sanctions, Trump instead announced this face-to-face summit. 3 previous Trump-brokered rounds of Russia-Ukraine talks this summer have failed to narrow differences. Ukraine insists on full territorial integrity, rejecting any deal that legitimizes Russian control over occupied regions, particularly Crimea. Russia remains adamant on keeping Crimea, securing the Donbass, and ensuring Ukraine's neutrality. The Trump administration has floated a controversial framework, reportedly involving territorial swaps that would allow Russia to retain Crimea and the Donbass while ceding Kherson and Zaporizhia back to Ukraine. This proposal has already drawn sharp criticism from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has warned against any decisions without Ukraine, although the White House has hinted at a possible trilateral meeting including Zelensky. For now, it remains a Trump-Putin summit. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has said that including Zelensky at this stage would not be productive, suggesting the U.S. president must first broker an initial understanding with Russia before bringing Ukraine into the room. The choice of Alaska is heavy with historical symbolism. Once a Russian territory, it was sold to the U.S. in 1867. For Russia, the location underscores its historical ties to the region. For the U.S., it represents a reminder of strategic expansion. Alaska also sits geographically close to Russia, separated only by the Bering Strait, making it a politically neutral yet symbolically charged venue. The stakes are high, but so are the risks. If the talks fail, both sides could harden their positions. Russia might escalate military operations ahead of any future negotiations, while Ukraine could push for stronger NATO security guarantees. For Trump, a breakdown would undercut one of his most prominent foreign policy pledges that only he can deliver peace in Ukraine. As with many historic events that have taken place on this date, the outcome will be judged not just by immediate headlines but by its long-term consequences. Swipe left for next video. From independence struggles and wartime surrenders to cultural revolutions, August 15th has been a date when history has pivoted in new directions. Whether the Trump-Putin Alaska talks will join that list depends on whether they produce a genuine step towards ending one of the most dangerous conflicts of the 21st century, or simply become another entry.